A wounded Native American warrior collapsed in a blizzard, saved by an Irish rancher who risked everything to help a supposed enemy. But what the warrior whispered before vanishing into the night revealed secrets that would transform a struggling ranch into the most prosperous spread in Wyoming territory. If you want to discover how an act of compassion between two different worlds led to an incredible partnership that changed the American West forever, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for more stories that prove humanity transcends all boundaries. Can traditional Native knowledge and European determination create something greater than either culture could achieve alone? The Wyoming wind howled across the Mackenzie Ranch like a banshee's wail, driving snow so thick that Samuel could barely see his own boots as he trudged toward the barn. It was February 1887, and this winter had been the harshest he'd experienced. In his 7 years of ranching in the territory, Samuel Mackenzie pulled his wool coat tighter around his weathered frame. At 45, the Irish immigrant had calloused hands that told the story of countless hours working this unforgiving land. His auburn hair, now streaked with premature gray, whipped around his face as he fought against the blizzard. "Belle, Belle, where are you, girl?" He called out, his voice nearly lost in the wind. Belle was his border collie, a black and white dog who had been his constant companion since arriving in Wyoming. She was smart, loyal, and had saved his cattle from wolves more times than he could count. But she'd been missing since morning, and Samuel's worry gnawed at him like hunger. His wife Margaret had begged him not to venture out in the storm. "Sam, you'll freeze to death out there," she'd pleaded from their small log cabin. Their 3 children, Mary, Patrick, and little Timothy, clustered around the fireplace behind her. "I can't lose Belle, Maggie. She's saved our hides too many times. I won't abandon her now." Samuel had built this ranch for nothing, arriving in Wyoming territory with little more than determination and a handful of cattle. The land was beautiful, but brutal, and tensions with the local Lakota and Cheyenne tribes made life even more precarious. Most of his neighbors viewed the Native Americans as nothing more than obstacles to progress, but Samuel had always tried to maintain a respectful distance. As he stumbled through the knee-deep snow, Samuel heard a faint whimpering. Following the sound, he discovered Belle trapped under a fallen tree branch, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. Beside the injured dog lay a man, barely conscious and covered in snow. Even in the dim twilight, Samuel could see the distinctive clothing and long black hair that marked him as Lakota. The man's buckskin jacket was soaked with blood, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Samuel's first instinct was caution. Relations between settlers and the tribes had been tense since Custer's defeat at Little Bighorn 11 years earlier. Many ranchers in the area would have left the man to die, or worse. But as Samuel looked at the wounded stranger, he saw something that transcended fear. Another human being in desperate need of help. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," Samuel muttered. Crossing himself out of habit, the injured man's eyes fluttered open, revealing dark pupils clouded with pain. He tried to speak, but only a weak gasp escaped his lips. Samuel could see that the man had been shot, likely by cavalry or buffalo soldiers. The wound in his shoulder was severe, and he was losing blood rapidly. Samuel looked between Belle and the stranger, his mind racing. He could carry one of them back to the ranch, but not both. The dog was injured but stable. The man was dying. Without hesitation, Samuel lifted the unconscious warrior onto his shoulders. The man was surprisingly light, weakened by blood loss and exposure. Samuel then carefully extracted Belle from under the branch, fashioning a makeshift sling from his belt to carry the injured dog. The journey back to the ranch house felt like an eternity. The wind fought him every step, and twice he nearly lost his footing in the deep snow. But Samuel Mackenzie was nothing if not stubborn, a trait that had served him well on the frontier. When he finally stumbled through the door of his cabin, Margaret gasped in shock. "Samuel Mackenzie, what in the Lord's name?" "He's dying, Maggie. Help me get him to the spare room." Margaret stared at the unconscious Lakota warrior, her face a mixture of fear and compassion. Like her husband, she had grown up hearing stories about savage Indians. But looking at this wounded man, she saw only another soul in need. "Mary, heat some water," Margaret commanded their 14-year-old daughter. "Patrick, get the medical supplies." From the chest, "Timothy, stay by the fire and don't move." Samuel laid the stranger on a narrow bed in their spare room, while Margaret examined his wounds. She had learned basic medical care out of necessity. The nearest doctor was 3 days' ride away, in good weather. "The bullet's still in there," she said quietly. "If we don't get it out soon, ... "He'll die," Samuel finished. Margaret nodded grimly. "Sam, are you sure about this? If the cavalry finds out we helped him ... Samuel looked down at the wounded man's face. Despite the pain etched in his features, there was a nobility there, a quiet dignity that commanded respect. "Maggie, my own people died of hunger and disease while the English landlords sat in their warm houses. I won't become the kind of man who turns away from suffering." Margaret squeezed her husband's hand. It was one of the many reasons she'd fallen. In love with him, his conscience was as strong as his back. For the next hour, Margaret worked to extract the bullet, while Samuel held the man down and Mary assisted with supplies. The warrior regained consciousness several times during the procedure, his dark eyes fixed on Samuel's face with an intensity that was both unsettling and somehow grateful. When Margaret finally extracted the bullet, a cavalry issue round, the man whispered something in Lakota before losing consciousness again. "What do you think he said?" Mary asked quietly. Samuel shook his head. "I don't know, lass. But we'll find out when he's strong enough to tell us." As the blizzard raged outside, the Mackenzie family took turns watching over their unexpected guest. Samuel sat in the chair beside the bed, cleaning and oiling his rifle, not out of distrust, but out of caution. If cavalry patrols came looking for their wounded prisoner, the Mackenzies would need to be ready. What Samuel didn't know was that this stranger would soon reveal information that would save his family's lives and share knowledge that would transform their struggling ranch into the most prosperous spread in the territory. But first, the wounded warrior had to survive the night. 3 days passed before the wounded man regained full consciousness. During that time, the blizzard had subsided, leaving the ranch buried under 4 feet of snow. Samuel had managed to dig paths to the barn and check on his cattle, but travel beyond the immediate property was impossible. Belle, her leg splinted and bandaged, lay by the fireplace recovering from her own injuries. She seemed unusually calm about the presence of the stranger, which Samuel took as a good sign. Animals, he'd learned, were often better judges of character than people. On the 3rd evening, as Margaret was changing the man's bandages, his eyes opened and stayed open. He studied her face for a long moment, then spoke in careful English. Double quotes, "You ... saved my life." Margaret nearly dropped the clean cloth she was holding. "You speak English?" "Learned. At mission school. Before." He gestured weakly toward his wounded shoulder. Samuel, hearing voices, entered the room with his rifle across his arm, a precaution he'd maintained since bringing the stranger home. "You're awake," Samuel said, not pointing the weapon, but keeping it ready. The warrior's eyes moved to the rifle, then back to Samuel's face. "You have ... every right to be careful. Your people and mine. We are at war. What's your name?" Samuel asked, settling into the chair beside the bed. "I am called White Eagle. I am Lakota, of the Oglala Band." Samuel nodded. He'd heard of the Aglala. They were known as fierce warriors, but also as people of honor. I'm Samuel Mackenzie. This is my wife Margaret and my children. White Eagle attempted to sit up, wincing with pain. Margaret gently pressed him back down. You need to rest. You lost a lot of blood. There is no time for rest, White Eagle said urgently. I must tell you ... There is danger coming. Samuel leaned forward. What kind of danger? White Eagle's eyes were intense, focused. 3 days ago, I was scouting near Fort Laramie. I overheard cavalry officers talking. They planned to raid this valley, looking for a war party that attacked a supply wagon. But there was no war party here, Samuel said. I know, but they believe there was. And they plan to burn out any ranchers they think might be helping Indians. White Eagle's gaze was steady. They mentioned your ranch by name. Margaret gasped. Samuel felt his blood run cold. Why would they suspect us? Because you are Irish. Because you keep to yourself. Because you don't attend the meetings in town where men talk about Indian problems. White Eagle coughed, specks of blood appearing on his lips. Sometimes, not choosing a side means others choose one for you. Samuel stood and paced to the small window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. He'd come to Wyoming to escape persecution and build a better life for his family. The idea that his own government might now see him as an enemy was almost too much to bear. When? He asked quietly. Soon. Maybe tomorrow, when the snow clears enough for horses. Margaret moved closer to her husband. Sam, what do we do? Before Samuel could answer, White Eagle spoke again. There is more you must know. The war party they seek, they were not from my band. They were young men, angry and hungry, from a reservation far to the north. They are long gone now, back to their people. So we're all in danger for nothing, Samuel said bitterly. Not for nothing, for misunderstanding, for fear, for the same reasons men have always killed each other. White Eagle struggled to sit up again, and this time Margaret didn't stop him. But I can help you. How? White Eagle reached slowly into his jacket, moving carefully to avoid alarming Samuel. He withdrew a small leather pouch decorated with beadwork. There is a place 2 hours' ride north. A hidden valley where my people sometimes winter. The cavalry does not know of it. You could take your family there. Wait until the danger passes. Samuel stared at the pouch. Why would you help us? For all you know, we could be the kind of settlers who'd hand you over to the cavalry for a reward. White Eagle smiled for the first time since awakening. Your dog told me. Belle? Animals know the hearts of men better than men know the hearts of other men. She trusts you completely. And she was not afraid of me, even wounded and strange. That tells me you have taught her that not all strangers are enemies. Samuel looked at Belle, who had limped into the room and was now sitting calmly beside White Eagle's bed, her tail wagging slowly. There's something else, White Eagle continued. In return for your kindness, I want to share something with you. Knowledge that has been in my family for generations. What kind of knowledge? White Eagle's eyes grew distant. This land ... it holds secrets. Water that runs deep underground. Minerals that shine like stars. Places where grass grows thick even in drought years. He looked directly at Samuel. Your ranch could be more than it is. Much more. Margaret exchanged glances with her husband. What do you mean? Tonight, if I am strong enough, I will show you maps that my grandfather drew on hide. Maps that show where the earth gives up its treasures freely. White Eagle paused, studying Samuel's face. But first, you must decide. Will you take your family to safety, or will you stay and fight men who see you as their enemy? Samuel was quiet for a long moment, weighing their options. Finally, he spoke. If we run now, we'll always be running. This is our home. We'll make our stand here." White Eagle nodded approvingly. "And I will help you prepare. And when this trouble has passed, I will show you how to make this land sing with abundance." Outside, the wind was picking up again, and Samuel could hear the distant sound of wolves howling. But for the first time since finding the wounded stranger in the snow, he felt something approaching Hope. What he didn't know was that White Eagle's knowledge would indeed transform their ranch. But first, they would have to survive. The next 48 hours. That night, after the children had gone to bed, White Eagle asked Samuel to help him to the kitchen table. Despite Margaret's protests about his condition, the Lakota warrior insisted he was strong enough to sit up for a while. "What I am about to show you," White Eagle said slowly, "has been passed down through 7 generations of my family. My great-great-grandfather first drew these maps when the Lakota came to this land." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a carefully wrapped bundle of soft deerskin. With reverent hands, he unfolded it to reveal detailed drawings etched into the leather with natural dyes and charcoal dots. Samuel leaned forward, studying the intricate markings. The map showed the valley where his ranch sat, but with far more detail than any survey he'd ever seen. There were symbols marking water sources, mineral deposits, and what appeared to be underground caves. "This mark here," White Eagle pointed to a symbol near where Samuel's north pasture lay, "shows where silver runs in veins through the rock. Not enough for mining, but enough to trade with merchants in Cheyenne." Margaret traced another symbol with her finger. "What's this one?" "Underground river. Flows year-round, even in drought. If you dig here," White Eagle pointed to a specific spot, "you will have water when your neighbor's wells run dry." Samuel studied the map more carefully. According to the markings, his property sat on some of the richest grazing land in the territory, with access to resources he'd never imagined. "Why are you telling us this?" he asked. White Eagle was quiet for a moment. "My people are leaving this land. The government will force us onto reservations far from here. But the land, the land remains. It should be cared for by someone who understands its value, not just its price." But surely other ranchers see only grass for cattle and space for houses. They do not see the signs that speak of underground rivers or the plants that grow where minerals lie beneath the soil. White Eagle met Samuel's eyes. "You saved my life when you could have left me to die. You risk your own safety to help an enemy. This tells me you see more than just profit in the land." A sound outside interrupted their conversation, the distant but unmistakable sound of horses moving through snow. Samuel immediately extinguished the oil lamp and moved to the window. "How many?" White Eagle whispered. "Can't tell. Maybe 6 or 8 riders." Samuel checked his rifle. "Margaret, get the children to the root cellar." "No," White Eagle said firmly. "If they find me here, they will kill us all. I must go. You can't travel yet. You'll reopen your wounds." White Eagle was already struggling to his feet. "Better I die in the snow than bring death to your family." Samuel made a quick decision. "The barn. There's a hay loft where you can hide. If they search, they'll look in the house first." With Margaret's help, they got White Eagle to the barn, where Samuel created a hiding place among the hay bales. Belle, despite her injured leg, followed them and seemed to understand the need for quiet. "If something happens to me," White Eagle whispered as Samuel covered him with hay, "the maps are yours. Use them well." Samuel hurried back to the house just as the riders approached. Margaret had roused the children and positioned them around the fireplace, trying to create a scene of a peaceful family evening. The knock on the door came hard and demanding. "Mackenzie, open up. This is Lieutenant Morrison, United States Cavalry." Samuel opened the door to find 8 soldiers, their faces grim with cold and suspicion. "Lieutenant Morrison, A young officer with pale eyes and a thin mustache pushed his way inside without invitation. "Mr. Mackenzie, we're searching for a wounded Indian who escaped from a skirmish 3 days ago. Have you seen anything suspicious?" "Nothing but snow and wind, Lieutenant." Morrison's eyes swept the cabin, taking in every detail. "Mind if we look around? Would it matter if I did?" The lieutenant smiled coldly. "Not really." For the next hour, the soldiers searched every inch of the house. They found nothing suspicious, but Morrison seemed reluctant to leave. "You know, Mackenzie, some folks in town wonder about you. You keep to yourself. Don't participate in community defense meetings. Makes people wonder where your loyalties lie." "My loyalty is to my family and my ranch," Samuel replied evenly. "See, that's what worries me. In times like these, a man needs to choose sides clearly." Samuel felt his temper rising, but forced himself to remain calm. "I chose my side when I came to this territory to build a life for my family. I'm not interested in wars with anyone." Morrison studied him for a long moment. "We'll be patrolling this area regularly. If you see anything at all, you'd better report it immediately." After the soldiers left, Samuel waited a full hour before returning to the barn. He found White Eagle barely conscious, his wounds having reopened during the stress of hiding. "They're gone," Samuel whispered as he helped the warrior back to the house. "For now," White Eagle replied weakly. "But they will return. Men like that, they see enemies everywhere because they fear their own shadows." Over the next 2 days, while White Eagle recovered his strength, he shared more details about the maps and the land's hidden resources. He explained how to read the signs that indicated underground water, how to identify plants that grew above mineral deposits, and which areas would provide the best grazing even during drought years. More importantly, he taught Samuel about the delicate balance needed to work with the land rather than simply taking from it. The white man's way is to use the land until it is exhausted, then move on, White Eagle explained. "My people learned to take only what we needed and give back what we could. The land repays such respect with abundance." On the 3rd morning, White Eagle announced that he was strong enough to travel. "Where will you go?" Margaret asked. "North to find my people. The reservation they have assigned us is far from here, but perhaps there we can rebuild." Samuel walked with him to the edge of the property, where White Eagle had left his horse hidden in a grove of cottonwoods. The animal, a sturdy painted pony, had somehow survived the blizzard. "Before I go," White Eagle said, "there is one more thing you must know." He reached into his saddlebags and withdrew a small pouch filled with silver nuggets from the place marked on the map. "Take these to Cheyenne and trade them carefully. Do not let anyone know where you found them, or you will have more visitors than cavalry patrols." Samuel stared at the silver. "I can't take this. You already have. It comes from your land." White Eagle mounted his horse carefully, still favoring his wounded shoulder. "Remember, Samuel Mackenzie, the land will provide if you listen to what it tells you." As he prepared to ride away, White Eagle leaned down and spoke quietly. "One more warning. Lieutenant Morrison will return. Men like him always do. When he comes back, he will bring more soldiers, and he will be looking for reasons to arrest you. Be ready." "How do you know?" White Eagle's expression was grim. "Because I have seen his kind before. They cannot leave well enough alone." With that, he rode north into the snow-covered wilderness, disappearing among the pine trees like a ghost. Samuel returned to the house to find Margaret studying the deerskin maps by lamplight. "Sam," she said softly, "if even half of what he told, U.S. is true ... double quotes. I know. But first, we have to survive what's coming." Neither of them knew that White Eagle's final warning would prove prophetic, or that the knowledge he had shared would indeed transform their ranch into the most prosperous spread in the territory. But first, they would face their greatest test. Yet, spring came early to the Wyoming Territory that year, and with it, the fulfillment of White Eagle's prophecy. Lieutenant Morrison returned in April with 20 soldiers and a mandate from his commanding officer to investigate possible Indian sympathizers in the valley. But Samuel Mackenzie was ready. Following White Eagle's advice, he had quietly gathered evidence of the soldiers' previous harassment and had made contact with territorial authorities in Cheyenne. The silver nuggets had been traded discreetly for gold, which Samuel used to hire a lawyer and document his family's legal status as landowners. More importantly, he had begun implementing White Eagle's knowledge about the land dot in the location. Marked on the Lakota maps, Samuel had dug a well that produced the sweetest, most abundant water anyone in the territory had ever seen. Word spread quickly among neighboring ranchers, who began offering to buy water rights during the dry summer months. The underground mineral deposits, while not extensive enough for mining, provided a steady source of silver that Samuel traded carefully in different towns to avoid suspicion. Within months, he had enough capital to expand his herd and improve his buildings, but it was the grazing knowledge that proved most valuable. White Eagle had shown him which areas would remain green even during drought, which plants indicated the richest soil, and how to rotate cattle to prevent overgrazing. By midsummer, the Mackenzie Ranch had the fattest cattle and the greenest pastures in the region dot. When Morrison arrived with his enlarged patrol, he found a prosperous ranch operated by a family that had become pillars of the local community. Samuel had used his newfound prosperity to help struggling neighbors, sharing water during dry spells and offering fair prices for cattle. The same townspeople who had once viewed him with suspicion now spoke of him as one of their most valuable citizens. "Mackenzie," Morrison said, dismounting from his horse with obvious frustration, "I'm here to conduct another search of your property." "Of course, Lieutenant. Though I should mention that I've recently hired 3 ranch hands, all former cavalry. Veterans. They're armed and patrol the property regularly." Samuel's tone was friendly but firm. "We've had problems with cattle thieves, you understand." Morrison's eyes narrowed as he spotted the mentioned ranch hands, all watching from strategic positions around the property. The lieutenant was no fool. He recognized a defensive position when he saw one. "I also should mention," Samuel continued, "that my lawyer in Cheyenne has advised me of my rights regarding repeated searches without evidence of wrongdoing. But you're welcome to look around, provided you have proper documentation." Morrison's jaw tightened. He had no such documentation, and he knew that times had changed since his last visit. The territory was moving toward statehood, and arbitrary harassment of citizens was becoming politically dangerous. "This isn't over, Mackenzie." "I certainly hope it is, Lieutenant. I've got cattle to tend and a business to run." After the soldiers left, Samuel found himself thinking of White Eagle. The warrior had been right about everything: the land's hidden resources, the coming harassment, and the need to be prepared for both. That evening, as Samuel sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, his daughter Mary joined him. "Papa, do you ever wonder what happened to the Indian man who helped us?" Samuel smiled. "Every day, lass, every day." "Do you think we'll ever see him again?" Before Samuel could answer, Belle raised her head from where she lay on the porch, her ears perked toward the northern trail. In the distance, barely visible in the gathering dusk, a lone rider approached. Samuel stood, his hand instinctively moving to his rifle, but Belle's tail began to wag. As the rider drew closer, Samuel recognized the painted pony first, then the straight-backed posture of its rider. White Eagle dismounted near the porch, moving more easily than when he had left 3 months earlier. His shoulder had healed completely, and he looked stronger, healthier. "My friend," White Eagle said simply. "Welcome back," Samuel replied, extending his hand. White Eagle clasped it firmly. I came to see how the land has treated you. Over dinner, Samuel and Margaret shared the story of their improved fortunes, the successful water well, and the transformation of their ranch. White Eagle listened with satisfaction, occasionally nodding or asking questions about specific techniques. You have learned well, he said finally. The land recognizes those who respect it. We couldn't have done it without your knowledge, Margaret said. The knowledge was already here, White Eagle replied. I simply helped you see what was always present. After the children had gone to bed, White Eagle shared his own news. His band had been relocated to a reservation in the Dakota Territory, but they were surviving and beginning to adapt to their new circumstances. And you? Samuel asked. What will you do now? White Eagle was quiet for a moment. I have been thinking about that. My people are learning new ways to live. Perhaps it is time for me to learn as well. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small leather pouch. I have a proposal for you, Samuel Mackenzie. Samuel waited. What if a Lakota warrior and an Irish rancher became partners? You have the land and the legal standing. I have knowledge of plants, animals, and natural signs that could make this ranch even more prosperous. Samuel looked at Margaret, who nodded, almost imperceptibly. The territory is changing, White Eagle continued. Soon it will become a state. There will be new laws, new opportunities, but there will also be new challenges. Two men from different worlds working together might find solutions that neither could discover alone. Samuel considered the proposal. It was unprecedented, possibly dangerous, and almost certainly controversial. It was also the right thing to do. Partners, Samuel said, extending his hand again. White Eagle gripped it firmly. Partners. The partnership that began that night would become legendary in Wyoming Territory. White Eagle adopted the English name William Eagle and, with Samuel's sponsorship, acquired legal status as a territorial resident. Together, they developed innovative ranching techniques that combined Lakota traditional knowledge with European farming methods. The Mackenzie Eagle Ranch became the most successful operation in the region, known for its sustainable practices, abundant water, and consistently healthy livestock. More importantly, it became a symbol of cooperation between cultures that most people believed could never coexist. Years later, when Wyoming achieved statehood and William Eagle was elected to the territorial legislature, he would often credit that snowy night when a wounded warrior met an Irish rancher as the moment when two worlds found a way to become one. And Bell, who had played an unwitting role in bringing them together, lived to be an old dog, forever remembered as the one who taught two men that trust could exist between the most unlikely friends. The deerskin naps remained in the Mackenzie family for generations, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected sources, and that the land itself cares nothing for the color of a man's skin or the language. He speaks only for the respect with which he treats it. Samuel Mackenzie had come to Wyoming Territory seeking a new life for his family. Instead, he found something greater, a new way for different peoples to live together on the same land, each bringing their own gifts to create something neither could have achieved alone.